For the last time, it's Wendigo psychosis, not Winnie the Pooh psychosis. I yelled at Marcus as we trekked through the forest. Let's meet in the middle and call it Winnie the Go psychosis. Imagine someone so starved of honey they go nuts. He joked, walking backwards to face me. Coming to a theater near you, Damien sarcastically said as he caught up to us. Being the shortest of our group, he had a bit of a harder time keeping up. It was our occasional camping trip. We could pick a random spot and go. This time it was Damien's turn. So far in our little trek, we'd been hiking for hours when things started to get a little weird. The trees began to have white trunks and bark that seemed to be one big piece. The leaves took on a solid dome-like shape. We came to an open area that led down to a lake. Its water was crystal clear, and it seemed to have a small island in the center of it. The island had what looked like red grass. Wow, he was right. The place is beautiful, Damien said, staring at the lake. He seemed almost mesmerized by it. Marcus didn't even have one of his signature dumb remarks. Wait a minute. What do you mean he was right? I asked, looking at Damien like he had just said he saw a unicorn. A guy in my marketing class suggested this place. He told me it was like anywhere I'd ever been. I just thought it'd be a nice camping spot, but nothing like this, he answered before approaching the water. Marcus and I followed Damien's lead. You could really see directly through to the bottom of the lake. There weren't any fish, and the dirt at the bottom was white. It was like the dirt turned into one huge tile. This place is kind of freaky, Marcus said, looking a bit uneasy. I don't blame him. The place was freaky. We had no idea what caused things to look like this. I walked around the lake to see if I could find anything familiar. I grabbed a stick and went to poke the tile-looking earth under the water, when suddenly Damien jumped into the water and began to swim to the small island. The hell are you doing? Get out of there! I yelled as he climbed onto the red patch of land. Damien seemed confused as he inspected the crimson lawn. It's not grass! He yelled before he grabbed some of the knot grass and put it into his pocket. He swam back to us where he inspected the plant he picked. It looked like a magic mushroom had a baby with a Mario mushroom. Aside from being thinner than usual, it had the shape of psilocybin. However, the top was blood red. I slapped it out of Damien's hand just before he put the thing in his mouth. What are you doing? I yelled before picking the mushroom up. Damien looked at me like I just kicked a box full of kittens and puppies into a river. I was about to go to space, he responded as he pulled another mushroom out of his pocket. However, before he could do anything, Marcus wrestled it out of his hand and took the rest out of his pockets. Come on, man. They could be poisonous. Damien gave up his stupid attempts to get high. More like he knew Marcus could restrain him with no effort, and that we will tie him up again. Don't ask, it's a weird story. After thinking about it, I pocketed some of the mushrooms. I could see if they were a new type later. After we all calmed down and decided to set up camp, finding firewood was a pain since we had to walk a good distance till we could even get a stick. Once we ate, I decided to turn in for the night. Marcus and Damien were talking about some new show that they were watching. I honestly wasn't listening. I couldn't focus with how dead quiet it was. The absolute quiet kept me up. Well, the silence was enhanced somehow when Marcus let out the loudest and most disgusting fart I'd ever heard. Are you even human? I shouted from the tent only to get laughter as a response. They're idiots. But they're my idiots. A scream suddenly jolted me awake. Stumbling over my sleeping bag and grabbing the hatchet I brought, I ran out of the tent. What I saw didn't make any sense. Damien was gone and someone was dragging Marcus towards the tree line. At first, I thought they were messing with me, but the moonlight illuminated who or what this guy was. He was emaciated and tall. He wore torn cargo pants and a white mask. Marcus was thrashing and trying to get away from this guy, but it was futile. Despite possibly being able to throw this guy like a pebble, he was struggling to break the grip on his leg. I saw genuine fear in Marcus's eyes. Help! He yelled, desperately grabbing at the ground, trying to find any way he could anchor himself. I ran faster than I thought I could and swung the hatchet at the masked man's face. I missed, and he kept at his task like a robot. His only focus was on dragging Marcus away. I brought down the hatchet on his wrist and it cut like butter. I know I'm not strong enough to do that. Once he was free, we ran back over to the tent. Marcus steamrolled poor Damien. What the hell happened? Damien asked as Marcus helped him up. Something tried to drag me away. Where were you? Marcus said, shaking and pointing in the direction of the masked man. The man and his hand were gone. The only thing remaining was a small puddle of what I could only assume was blood. I scanned the area with a flashlight, but there was nothing. We decided to sleep in shifts after that. Unfortunately, nothing else happened that night. As we packed up in the morning, something was bothering me. Who told you about this place? I asked, looking at Damien. It was a guy in my physics class. I was telling him about how crazy people on drugs get during Mardi Gras, and he told me that I could get some weird but great shrooms here. He never mentioned crazy crackheads. Hey guys, Marcus shouted, drawing our attention to the small mushroom island. The man with the mask was standing on it. We were roundhouse kicked by the uncanny valley. His skin was pure white, and the thing I thought was a mask was his face. At first I thought it was someone else until I noticed that his hand was missing. Actually, it wasn't missing. He was holding it in his other hand. A woman who looked like a porcelain mannequin walked up to him from seemingly nowhere and fed him a handful of mushrooms. His mouth suddenly went from almost invisible slit to a gaping maw with rows of shark-like teeth. As soon as he finished the mushrooms, he tore into his own hand like it was an apple. As he ate, the missing hand began to reform. First the nerves and veins, then the bone and muscle, finally the skin. We just witnessed Wolverine levels of regeneration in front of our own eyes. Once his hand regrew, the thing smiled at us. We were forced to focus on the horrific sight in front of us. We didn't even notice that it was somehow night again. It was instantaneous. We blinked and suddenly the creature was gone and the full moon was out. With a collective nope before grabbing our bags and anything that could be used as a weapon. Before we could leave, Damien grabbed the mushrooms I'd slapped from his hand and took count of the ones he still had. Alright, I have 15. We each get 5 just in case. We didn't argue and took our shares from his hand. Having real-life sensu beans was only a little reassuring. We began hiking the way that we came. Only the good thing about it was that it was a straight shot from the road. All we had to do was stay calm, watch each other's backs, and don't get turned around. We should be fine. We should be fine. However, the silence was deafening. All of us were so scared we couldn't talk. Even though Marcus was directly behind me, I couldn't help but imagine one of those things grabbing at me. Not being able to see that far ahead of me made it so that I couldn't judge the distance from us to the road. Even if we didn't make it to where the car was, just getting to a road would be a win. The light between what I now know are possibly giant mushrooms began to become less abundant before we were in complete darkness. Damien turned on a flashlight and led the way, while Marcus and I used our lights to check our surroundings. I turned around to see the porcelain-faced man directly behind us. It was like a weeping angel refusing to move as I stared at it. I began to grip my hatchet harder as I prepared to defend myself. I suddenly heard a ping of Marcus's cast iron skillet hitting something that was too close. All of a sudden, he grabbed the back of my shirt and we took off running. I nearly tripped over another one of those things that had a visible dent in its head and black blood leaking out of the slit of its mouth. The lack of noise made me even more jumpy. These things moved like owls. One suddenly tackled Damien. They both rolled to the ground and it started pummeling him. Marcus went full barbarian. He grabbed the thing and threw it like a rag doll. It landed at my feet and I buried the hatchet into its head until it stopped moving. I hit the ground as Marcus threw the skillet in my direction, hitting the one behind me. It stumbled back and I took the chance to trip it and get back up, swiping the skillet as I ran over to Marcus and Damien. Damien was unconscious, so Marcus threw him over his shoulder. But we needed to keep moving. I took the role of bodyguard while Marcus carried Damien. Marcus carrying an unconscious Damien while I fended off attackers. Why does that sound like a normal Friday night for us? After an eternity fending off those whatever the hell they are, we could finally see the regular forest. We were so close when suddenly something got Marcus's attention. "What the hell is this place?" he shouted as he stared with a look of absolute terror. These things were coming out of the white trees. One face looked like that of a middle-aged man, frozen in a silent scream before changing to the featureless face that we'd seen so far. It was pulling itself out as if the tree was trying to pull it back in. This distraction was just what the ones chasing us needed. Everything happened way too fast. Several of them blindsided Marcus, causing him to drop Damien. They easily lifted Marcus and began carrying him off. I ran after them and somehow managed to catch up. Taking the hatchet, I buried it into one of the monster's legs. As soon as one dropped Marcus, he was able to slip out of their grasp. But the moment he got to his feet, several more of them rushed him. "Get the hell out of here!" he yelled, trying his hardest to shake off his attackers. I grabbed Damien and did my best to drag him away. My legs felt like lead weights, but I used every ounce of strength I could muster to keep moving. I suddenly heard a blood-curdling scream come from Marcus's direction. Damien finally woke up and we both looked in the direction of the scream. I nearly puked at the sight of those things ripping Marcus apart. One tore a chunk off of his leg. The mushrooms from his pocket fell to the ground and they swarmed them like hungry piranhas. "I'm so sorry," I sobbed as I ran like a coward from one of my best friends. Damien did his best to keep up, but one of those things grabbed him. It bit his arm and ripped the bicep clean off. I grabbed a rock and smashed its head until it stopped moving. Before I could think of anything, Damien pulled one of the mushrooms out of his pocket and ate it. Immediately, his arm began to regenerate him. Seeing this, we started running again. Damien suddenly slowed down and grabbed my shoulder to try and keep up. Something's wrong," he said as I felt him begin to slow down even more. "You're probably just high," I said before I heard the familiar sound of a stomach growling. That's when I realized why the thing ate its own hand. Damien is probably starving at an accelerated rate. We were passing what I assumed was the last mushroom tree when one of those things tackled me. I was suddenly blinded as I hit the ground. It was like someone switched the sun on. The head of the thing on top of me suddenly exploded. A man in his 40s, wearing cargo pants and a flannel shirt, ran over to us. "You two alright?" "Wait a second, you're those missing campers. It's been weeks. We nearly gave up," he said, not even paying attention to the monster he just shot. I managed to get the mushrooms from Damien's pocket before the ambulance took him. I later found out that we'd been missing for weeks, despite it only feeling like a few days. I was able to come up with a half-assed story about getting separated after a bear attacked us. They never found Marcus' body, or the mushroom forest, and the dead body somehow disappeared. I lied and I told Damien I burned the mushrooms. I keep 3 of them in a backpack I take everywhere with some calorie-dense protein bars. The others are in a safe I have hidden in my house. A guy from the government talked to me about what actually happened. Surprisingly, he listened. Before he left, he said to be careful, and that another fairy circle could be my last. I gave him one of the mushrooms and he said he'd keep in touch.